The nurse finished giving the final few topical injections to the alien, who made a noise of delight as she said, "Okay, I think we're about done here. Next treatment won't be for 2 weeks," she said, pulling off her gloves. "But until then, just keep an eye on the injection site and let me know if you have any adverse reactions." "Sound good?" The alien, roughly quadrupedal being with a body that looked like it was made out of pockmarked sponge, gave a sound of enthusiastic agreement, saying, "Absolutely, and my thanks for helping with this. I've had flake nodes since I was a hatchling, so it would be nice to have some relief from it for a time." "Well," she said, "that's the idea in theory, but it'll take several treatments for the full effect to kick in. Here, let me sweep up my nurse droppings." As she started to clean up the bits of trash, gloves, gauze, empty syringes, and other detritus from the procedure, the alien quickly said, "Oh no, don't worry yourself about it. I can help clean up." They were a species known as swillifs in their own language, along with a number of unpronounceable high-pitched clicking and a key-associated psychopheromone, but most other species simply called them void sponges. The human nurse smiled, as the habit of void sponges to want to be helpful in tidying up was quite well known, although she thought as she finished closing up and repacking her bag, and went back through the ship's door to her waiting shuttle taxi. It did seem like no one ever knew exactly where they all put it. Within the privacy of his own room once again, Rill let out a stutter click of triumph. This attracted the attention of his first mate and good friend, Bol, who poked his head in to see what was going on. He stared in amazement as he saw the pile of trash the nurse had left behind, saying, "What is that?" With excitement, Rill let out a sound of surprise. "You mean you've not had a chance to deal with humans before?" "Only once or twice," said Bol. And Rill could tell his attention was still fixed on the pile of human trash, despite their species' lack of eyes or even discernible heads. "Well," said Rill, emitting some new pheromones indicating excitement and a willingness to mentor. "Humans are messy," he said matter-of-factly. "It's so exciting." Bol was slightly confused. "Yes, but many species are messy. Some of them are just unaware of cleanliness and tidiness, and others have fur, scales, or spines that attract and collect bits of dirt and debris. But this is clearly different," he said, admiring the pile of refuse once more. "Well, yes, humans are messy in ways that are permanent, or at least permanent enough. Would you like to see my collection?" Bol let out a series of clicks of excitement so loud and numerous that it vibrated the metal surfaces in the room. "Absolutely. It's been some time since I visited yours, I believe," he said with undisguised enthusiasm. "Yes," said Rill. "I believe it has been quite some time, but the route is still the same. You remember it?" "Oh, I haven't forgotten," said Bol. "And I'm locked in. I'm ready to travel there when you are." Rail's room was fairly Spartan, with only a desk, a computer stand, a small table with cup holders for beverage containers and food, and a small chair. There was also a small stool by the window looking out to the stars, now showing the human shuttle taxi as it prepared for the final departure sequence. But now the two void sponges were ready, and as one they stepped into the void between the dimensions. This was how they got their name, for their species had long ago developed the ability to shift into an extra-dimensional pocket dimension to escape predators and dangers. The route was not without its risks, and as Rill passed through he could feel the ravages of the space between punching literal holes through his form. Luckily for their species, almost the entire disintegration of one's body was needed in order to perish. However, it did mean that he would lose a few memory clusters here and there. In particular, it seemed like the largest casualty from this shift was the memory of what Kator paste tasted like. Judging from all the negative emotions and memories surrounding the gap that was the flavor of this food, he wasn't necessarily eager to refill that memory. He finished the shift into the large cavern that housed his collection. Bol also arrived a moment later, both of them sporting fresh holes through their already Swiss cheese-looking forms. But Bol simply let out a noise of wonder as they saw the size of Rill's collection. The space was psycho-reactive and resembled the caves that their species once called home long ago, damp, moist, with luminescent mineral patches dotting all across it. There were also tens of thousands of small alcoves, each containing priceless items. There were entire wings that resembled ones Bol had seen before in his own collection, with a different organizational style and different nuances that he could appreciate, if not necessarily wish to incorporate. But they contained perhaps the 10 or 20,000 different bits of discarded items that might be found amongst their own culture. There were a few rare items that it looked like he and Rill were both missing, but overall they both had very respectable collections of their own species' leftovers. But absolutely dwarfing this were cavernous halls upon halls of human items, seemingly near endless, each massive room filled with vibrant colors and shapes, text and words, images on plastic, wood, paper, and even some parts that were metal or more exotic substances. Ball was stunned and said nothing for a long moment as Rill drank in the awe of his companion with naked glee. Finally, Ball said, "There has to be hundreds of thousands of items here. Do you know how much of the total human collection this is?" Rill, still clearly having a good time, amazing his friend, said, "Oh, this isn't even a fraction of a percent. These are just what I was able to collect in the last century or so. But their history goes back thousands of years more. Humans have been producing remnants like this for almost as long as they've had fire." Ball let off some involuntary clicks of amazement at the statement. "You're telling me that there's more of this in their history?" he asked incredulously. The collection from his own species was a fraction of this size, starting from the ancient history of tens of thousands of years ago, when they first emerged from their caves and began to dream of the stars and more. There were pieces here and there, advancements made as they began to create more and different things, but always carefully, bit by bit, very rarely changing anything more than a little bit of filler here or a small nodule there. Certainly not enough to warrant a separate place in the collection until hundreds of such minor changes had gone by. But with humanity, here was a collection of various pieces and remnants, odd and ends that dwarfed the entire collective output of the species by orders of magnitude, and all from an odd biped, little more than some electrical signals bouncing inside a bag of water and sticks of calcium. Yet they physically produced this, far more enduring than even their own bodies would be, and in an ecstatic array of variations. Rill, clearly no longer able to contain his excitement, ushered Ball towards the rest of these treasures. Walking along the nearest segments, he pointed out alcoves and new shapes and colors of items within. These are all plastic wrappers, a carbon polymer that humans use to preserve and protect their foodstuffs. But why so many colors? I see languages across them as well, several of them, if the sigil differences are any indication. Well, said Rill, their culture still is heavily entrenched in a selfish barter system called capitalism, and as a result each merchant of foodstuffs tries to attract others to purchase it with credits, changing the appearance to make it more enticing or to convey vital or desired information about the contents within. They passed by dozens of rows of these wrappers, almost all of them different shapes, with colors rarely shared from one to the next. On several of them, Ball's photoreceptors were drawn by the twinkle of metallic coating on the inside, clearly some variations of the material to help protect the foodstuffs it covered. They turned towards another adjoining cavern. They began walking in that direction, their short footsteps crossing many long striding distances thanks to the non-Euclidean and thought-reactive nature of the pocket dimension. Reaching this wall, Rill began to rattle off names of what they were looking at, saying, "Over here we have packaging. Humans like to put almost everything into something else. These often display not only the item inside, but also a fictional or fantastical context, further enticing passing eyes." Then he saw Ball stare towards the glimmering and shimmering lights from another room. "This is one of my favorites. Follow me." They passed into a room that was one of the most beautiful Ball had ever seen. All across it were shapes, all translucent, mottled, and reflecting the lights carefully displayed behind each. The result was an unpredictable and chaotic yet mesmerizing mosaic of reflections and flicks of illumination that scattered all across the floor and ceiling of the cabin. "What is this beauty?" he finally stammered, involuntarily clicking as his photoreceptors were entranced by the beauty. "This is an outdated form of human containment," Rill explained. "It fell out of favor due to its stubbornness to decompose in landfills and such thanks to this type of polymer. But for a time it was some of the most ubiquitous and varied creations I had ever scarcely dared to imagine. This stunning art form is known as clamshell." Ball felt confusion as he remembered that it referred to the name of a mere mollusk from the human's home planet. The pictures he remembered seeing were boring, white, and plain, with some organic variations, sure, but nothing as magnificent as this. "I must say," he said at last, "they certainly improved on nature's design." Rill nodded empathetically. "But if they don't make it anymore, how did you come to acquire such a collection?" Ball said, gesturing at the tens of thousands of arrayed pieces covering all the surfaces around them. "Well, it turns out that humans, when they dispose of their waste, most often simply put it in a heap. They call it a landfill." Ball could tell Rill had been waiting to drop this particular bombshell, as he felt a wave of cautious questioning trying to temper his sudden kindling of unreasonable excitement. "They just made a pile of this stuff that never breaks down, never decays." "That's right," Rill confirmed. "Sometimes they cover with a thin layer of earth, but mostly for aesthetic purposes. Functionally, everything remains almost the same, with minor, if any, cosmetic damage. But it's still there for anyone to clean up. Those who keep the landfills are not typically predisposed to dig it up on a whim, but for a nominal fee they are happy to let curious beings such as ourselves take a closer look." Ball let out a subsonic screech as he felt his membranes stiffen with purpose. "We're going," Next shore leave, you and I. You're going to show me these landfills filled with treasure. Understood? Agreed. Real smiled. I thought you'd never ask. Johnson heard a noise and looked up, starting with surprise as he saw a pair of aliens in front of his desk. They looked as if a child had tried to badly carve a life-size cow out of a kitchen sponge. But the translators quickly spoke up, saying, "Hello, is this the New Centauri Waste Management Office? Keepers of the New Centauri County landfill." Johnson's eyes widened, recognizing the aliens from descriptions he had been warned about. "Yes, that's right," he said, but stood from his chair to be at eye level with the creatures, or at least where he would guess their eyes were. "Hope you know that void shifting inside the landfill is not allowed, understood? Anything you want to dispose of, you put it in here," he said, handing them each a 5-gallon bucket. Even without any recognizable face or features, he could sense the disappointment from them as they saw the minuscule space for items. Johnson sighed. "There's also a scale cart around the corner as well. Anything you find and want to keep, pile on there. Price is 10 credits per half-ton." "Understood." The first alien quickly stumbled out of the room, excitement visible even across species differences. The second stood thinking for a moment and then held up a credit link wrapped around one of its odd blocky limbs. He scanned it over the receiver in front of Johnson, and with a beep it registered a deposit of nearly 1,500 credits, causing the employee's eyes to nearly bug out of his head. "I think my friend may be a little bit eager," they communicated, "so I figured it might be good to pay in advance." Stunned at seeing more money in a single transaction than he had seen for anyone dropping off even the largest loads from construction megaprojects, he slumped back in his seat with a nod. The aliens stomped out, and Johnson, still in amazement, looked out the window as he saw the two strange creatures leaping happily between and through mountains of trash. "I guess one man's trash really is another alien's treasure," he thought to himself with a smile.